Hello friends, we will take the lecture on plant anatomy, CBCS pattern, SYBSC, Bot 301. Let us start with Unit 2, plant tissues. What are tissues? The definition is group of cells that are alike in origin, structure and function are known as tissues. In other words, a group of similar or dissimilar cells that perform a common function and have a common origin. Each plant organ with distinct morphological structure and function have their specific group of tissues. Tissues constitute the tissue system. In plants, there are two types of tissues, meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. Let us see one by one in detail. Meristematic tissue. The meristos word means to divide. The tissues in which cells have a power of division and are called meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissue consists of a group of undifferentiated cells which remain in a continuous state of cell division. The daughter cells are called derivatives, which later on differentiate into various permanent tissues. Now see the characteristics of meristematic tissues. Meristematic cells, or also called as meristems, are young, immature, living, mitotically dividing diploid cells. These are compactly arranged cells without intercellular spaces, mostly rounded to polygonal or rectangular in shape. Cells are young, metabolically very active, having thin primary wall, dense cytoplasm, large nucleus, and devoid of a vacuoles, reserve food materials. The function of meristematic tissues. Meristems are actively dividing tissues of the plant. New organs and their growth occur by the division of meristematic tissues. Meristems are responsible for primary and secondary growth of plant. Addition of secondary tissues such as wood and bark is a outcome of a meristematic tissues. See the classification of meristems. The meristems can be classified which is on the basis of origin and also on the basis of their position. The meristems which are based on origin can be classified as a promeristem, primary meristem and secondary meristem, while the meristems based on position can be classified as a apical meristem, intercalary meristem and lateral meristem. We will see all these things in detail. Meristems based on position in plant body. See in the diagram, the apical meristem which is situated apically at the tip of the root and shoot. Then the intercalary meristem situated in the nodal region at the bases of the leaves and is responsible for flattening and growth of any axillary shoot. It is short-lived. Then comes the lateral meristem, which is positioned laterally and responsible for secondary growth. Apical meristem. A mass of rapidly dividing cells present at the growing tips of the root, shoot, as well as the lateral branches are all called as apical meristem. Apical meristem not only let down the primary structure of the plant but also increases length of the root and shoot. Apical meristem consists of three groups of dividing cells like protoderm, ground meristem, and procambium. The function of apical meristem is the activity of apical meristem results in a primary growth of plant body by producing primary permanent tissues along with the general elongation of a plant. The protoderm gives epidermal tissues, ground tissue gives parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. These are the simple permanent tissues, whereas procambium gives primary xylem and primary phloem. It also gives leaves, axillary buds, and the flowers. All this is termed as a primary growth. Then the intercalary meristem. A meristem Developing between the regions of a mature or permanent tissues is called intercalary meristem. It represents remnant of apical meristem which are actually separated from the apex during the growth of axis and remain intercalated between the permanent cells. These are located at the base of a node, internode, and the leaves. These meristems are short-lived and convert in permanent tissues. What is the function? Function of intercalary meristem is to help and to increase in the length of internodes and other organs. The third is a lateral meristem. The meristem that occur along the lateral side of the plant organ is termed as lateral meristem. It is also called as secondary meristem as it is derived from a parenchyma cell. Parenchyma cells are already simple permanent tissue. So the secondary meristem is secondary in origin and which derive from a already differentiated permanent tissue which regain the capacity for to divide. These are radially dividing rectangular cells and responsible for secondary growth in higher plants like gymnosperms and angiosperm. So due to the activity of lateral meristem, the girth of the plant, the diameter of the plant, radial growth of the plant is possible. The example of lateral meristem are vascular cambium and cork cambium. See this diagram, meristematic tissues. It is showing the position of a apical meristem, then intercalary meristem and the lateral meristem. The plant growth is responsible from all these three meristematic tissues. These are the meristems. What is the function of lateral meristem? It is responsible for to increase in girth or thickness of the stem and root. It produces secondary tissues. The growth that takes place due to the lateral meristem is called as secondary growth. We know that secondary growth occurs in a stellar region as well as in a extrastellar cortical region. Due to the activity of a vascular cambium, addition of a secondary xylem and secondary phloem, and in a cortex region by the activity of cork cambium, which adds the cortex secondary cortex tissues and thus responsible for periderm formation. All these are the lateral meristem activity. Then the second, that is the meristem based on origin. We will see the classification of meristem based on origin. According to their origin and development, meristems are classified as promeristems, embryonal or primordial meristem. So promeristems are also called as embryonal because they are present right beginning from embryonic tissue. It is also called as a primordial meristem. Then primary meristem and secondary meristem. Let us see one by one in detail. Promeristem, a group of initials that lay down the function of plant organ called promeristem. It is also termed as primordial or embryonic meristem because it originates from embryo. It gives rise to the apical meristem, which consists of thin-walled, undifferentiated, isodiametric group of initials. It confines to a small area at tips of root and shoot and divide to give primary meristem. The primary meristem originates from promeristem and retains its meristematic activity. It persists throughout the life of plant. Apical meristem, intercalary meristem, and cambium of primary vascular bundle are the primary meristems. Primary meristems gives rise to the primary permanent tissues of a primary plant body. Then comes the secondary meristem. It is a meristem which develops from primary permanent tissues at a very later stage and gives rise to a secondary permanent tissues. It is called as secondary meristem. It is usually lateral in position. For example, vascular and cork cambium. Some of the living permanent cells regain their meristematic activity, their ability, and behaves as a secondary meristem. It is responsible for secondary growth in plant. The perennial plant requiring secondary growth. So the friends, we learned today about the primary permanent tissues as well as the meristematic tissues, their subtypes. See, this is the exercise for you. Do this exercise very well. Define tissues, define meristems. What is primary meristem? Which meristem responsible for secondary growth? Enlist the meristems based on position. Enlist the meristem based on origin, and also give the function of apical meristem. So, dear student, thank you.